What's up makers, Mike Clifford here, and this time I'm a Modustrial maker. I'm going to show you how to transform an Ikea Nordli dresser by making your own custom drawer fronts. Now I decided to make my dresser unique with a custom Soundwave engraving across the front, but you could use the processes shown in this video to customize your Ikea dresser with whatever drawer fronts you like. You could use any kind of hardwood, plywood, or really any other material. You could make it without engravings with your own custom engraving design. So let's get going and see how it's done.
And a big shout out to this video's sponsor, Inventables. You're going to hear more about them later. Unfortunately, the maple lumber I was using for this project had sat in my shop for a while and become warped. To flatten the warped wood, I had to create a planer sled. And a planer sled is just a flat, rigid piece of material with a block in front that prevents the piece of lumber from moving as it passes through the planer. You place shims underneath the wood on both sides so that it doesn't rock back and forth as passing through the planer, and use hot glue to secure those shims just in case. I then used some chalk to mark the top so that I'd know when the surface was level. Basically, when all the chalk is gone and you don't see it, then you know you've got a level surface. After a few passes with the planer sled, you'll have a flat piece of lumber on one side, which you can remove from the sled, flip over, and then flatten on the other side. And then you've got two parallel and flat sides on the top and bottom surfaces. With the top and bottom surfaces flat, I still needed to mill the sides to get them flat. And again, since I don't have a jointer, I just use a track saw. You could also use a circular saw, but basically you just want to get a straight line pretty close to 90. Doesn't have to be exact here, because then you can take your board over to your table saw, and because you've got a straight side to reference against, you can now run both sides of the board through the table saw and get two sides squared off to the top and bottom, so you have four perfectly squared sides for gluing up the lumber. Next, it was time to glue up the two panels that the four drawer fronts would be cut from. And for the first time, I decided to use dowels to align the boards during the glue up. I picked up this old Stanley number 59 jig from eBay. It's probably from the 70s or so. This jig is completely adjustable. It allows you to drill a perpendicular hole in the wood and align it in the middle of wood as wide as 2 3/4 inches. And I really like the results I got. Last I checked, there were about 50 on eBay, so highly recommend trying to find one of these if you can. And before going further, I want to back up a second and explain why a glue up was even necessary to create the panels for the drawer fronts. I didn't have boards wide enough to make each drawer front out of a single board. I also thought it would be cool to split a board across the top and bottom drawers so that the grain pattern would be continuous across the top and bottom drawers in the same way that the Soundwave pattern is. So what I did was make two panels, one for each side of the dresser, and each panel would then be cut in half to make a top and bottom drawer front. Back to the build, I cut each panel in half, then used the original Ikea panel to dial in the table saw and cut each of the drawer fronts to the exact right height. However, I'm going to leave the panels a bit long so that I can cut them to length after engraving the Soundwave.
All right, for the next part of the project, we're actually going to be going to a local makerspace here and going to be using an x-carve CNC to carve out the front of these doors. Let's go.
All right, so I see a lot of comments when there are CNC projects, people saying, I don't have a CNC, I can't do that, I can't afford it. I don't buy it. I don't have a CNC either. You can use easel software at home. It's super easy, super intuitive.
Hold up. Before I go into this carving, I'm going to show you just how easy it is to use easel. Now, easel is a browser-based application that is totally free to use when you sign up via the link in the video description below. One really cool feature of easel is that it lets you use vector image files and download them, import them into easel, and carve them out of wood. I did a Google search for a free SVG file for a Soundwave. There are lots of them, and found one I liked. I downloaded it, made sure that I was able to use it under the license it came with, then imported the SVG into easel. I could then just stretch it, manipulate it on my workpiece to get the look I liked out of the wood. Super easy. The only tricky thing was because the dresser was 60 inches wide, bigger than the x-carve, I had to divide it into two. Easy, I just duplicated the workpiece and put one half of the Soundwave pattern on one side and the other half on the other. So you'd have two drawer fronts on each side. Then you're ready to carve. This was my first real x-carve project, and it was just honestly amazing to see my design come to life via the machine.
We carved the drawer fronts on the x-carve. Now we got to get the backs ready. To do that, we're basically going to just recreate the Ikea drawer fronts that came with the dresser. So first we're going to use a router to cut a 1/4 inch slot across the bottom for the drawer base. Then we're going to clamp the Ikea drawer fronts to the drawer fronts we made to get the exact same hole pattern on the back of these drawer fronts.
And before cutting the slot and holes on the back of the drawer fronts, I went and cut them to length. I left them a bit long when I carved so that I could trim off any excess and get the Soundwave nicely centered in the drawers afterwards. And I just, again, used the actual Ikea drawers to dial in that width that was right. I brought the panel over to the router table and used a 1/4 inch straight bit to cut the slot that would receive the drawer bottom. Now for the hole pattern in the back, I basically created a template out of the original Ikea drawers by drilling all the way through the existing holes. Those holes could then serve as a guide so I could get the locations exact drilling into the back of my custom drawer front. I was pleasantly surprised how well this makeshift pattern worked. Everything ended up going together really easily. Then I used an 11.5 inch chamfer bit on my trim router to give the edges of the drawer fronts a nice finished look all the way around. Then it was on to the final sanding to remove all the little bits of wood left by using an up-carved bit on the x-carve. Then it's on to everybody's favorite part of a project, and that's applying the finish. And I went with water locks in this project because I really like how it brings out the grain in wood, and I needed some extra durability since this is a dresser and could be getting bumped. And water locks, as well as being a penetrating oil, also has a surface coat varnish that's not too plastically like a polyurethane. And at this point, seeing the grain starting to pop out and how it aligned with the Soundwave carve, I was starting to get pretty darn excited about this one. So while the finish dried, I went about getting the Ikea cabinets assembled. And for this, really you just need a hammer, screwdriver, and, well, I use a power tool even though the instructions tell you not to. And the instructions are, well, I won't say they're straightforward, but they're instructions. So I'm not going to repeat them for you again here. And it's always nice to have a little friend with you when you're doing this sort of thing. I'm going to pause the hyperlapse and really quickly show you one of the best things about building your own drawer fronts, and that is being able to use an impact driver because you're not worried about it ripping out that cheap cardboard-like material that most of the Ikea stuff is made from. Because of the way that I'd copied the hole pattern over from the Ikea drawers, I didn't have to make any modifications to put the drawers together. I just followed the directions but used my drawers. And then it was time to put it all together and see how it looked. The last step is drawer hardware, and I didn't want to do cutouts like the stock drawers because that would have interfered with the Soundwave pattern. So I chose these matte black finger pulls, and when I tried them out, I didn't like how far they stuck out. And so I made some 1/2-inch plywood spacers that I just screwed to the inside of the doors so that the finger pulls would stick out the minimum amount possible. And on the lower drawer, so that the finger pull didn't go over any of the Soundwave pattern, actually installed the finger pull on the underside of the drawer. You have to lean over a bit to open the lower drawer, but I'm still young, or at least that's what I keep telling myself.
Guys and gals, I am so stoked about how this dresser came out. I love how the Soundwave pattern aligns with the grain of the curly maple. I love the matte black and natural maple color scheme. In fact, I made a bed to match it that, what the heck, I'll show you a quick preview. Video for that is coming out in the next month or so. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the bell button next to it so you can find out when that bed video and other of my videos come out. If you like this video, I greatly appreciate it if you hit that thumbs up button to let YouTube know. It really does help me out and keeps me motivated to make these videos. So that's it for this time, and I'll see you next time.